What's up guys, welcome to the Drone Camps channel. I'm Justin Davis and I have another awesome build video here for you today. We're going to review and build, set up, go into Betaflight, do some motor testing, all that stuff here for you in this video. So start to finish step-by-step video on how to build the TYRO109, the newest EACHINE kit that you can buy. All the parts are inside and we'll unbox this in a second. I'll show you what's in the box and I'll also show you some things that you need to get your build going, some of the necessary tools and all that jazz. This video is primarily for the beginner audience in FPV and I always like to help you guys out. So there's going to be some extra information in here. Maybe if you are an experienced builder, you might also learn something in this video as well. Also, Patreon guys, if you'd like to join the camp's Patreon, there's a link down below that says be my friend, just under all the links for my recommendations for the TYRO109. You can click that link and become a Patreon on the channel to support videos, more videos like this one, and help keep my lights on and keep the channel funded. So starts at $1 or more. You can jump in our Discord chat. We have tons of Discord. And check this out. This is our giveaway for April for our Patreons. You can get included in that. I'm going to give away this iFlight Cinna B right here to one lucky Patreon on the channel. And you can also get some group discount orders on batteries from RDQ. RDQ stepped up and they're giving us some perks here on the channel. So I got my contact over at RDQ if you guys want to hop in on that. And yeah, some awesome stuff going on in the behind the scenes in the Patreon. And you can message me directly. So anyway, let's get started with the TYRO109. And let me show you what's in the box. First thing I like to do is spread everything out and look at what I have in a box before I begin to build it. Take everything out of the bags and get all my tools ready. So this is what the box looks like when you open it up. We get some stickers and all the stuff in here. So one of the first things you want to do before you get started building is just take everything out of the plastic bags, lay it all out like this so you can just look at it. And I will tell you right away, what I'm looking at here is way better than the TYRO99. If you're asking me which one you should get the 109 kit, because this is the updated version of the TYRO99. There's no reason to buy the older one now because we have a lot of perks added to this one. We're going to talk about those as we build it. One of the first big perks is, I'm going to tell you about what's laying here, the CADX camera. Now the 109 includes a CADX camera. It is the EOS 2 camera, CMOS 1200 TVL camera, micro size with that converter on there so it will fit your frame. And if you blow this camera out, this is cool because you could replace it still using this little converter right here. 2 bolts on the side here, and we'll put 2 through when we start to put this on the side plates. So one of the biggest reasons to get this kit right now is having this camera. This is a great camera. A lot of people really like this camera, and it already has the wire here, no soldering. We're just going to plug that into the flight controller, usually in the front of the flight controller. And I'll show you where that all goes coming up during that step. But we also get 2 straps, which is cool. Some cable hardware here, your XT60, the harness that's going to come up from your 4-in-1 ESC to your flight controller, some zip ties, 4 2206 motors, and those are clockwise and counterclockwise motors. Usually the black one will go on the back right, and then we'll work our way around. Also, you get the ESCs right here, the 4-in-1 ESCs, the flight controller. This is an F4 flight controller, and you get some heat shrink. You can put those over the arms of the quad and tidy up your wires. This is your pile of hardware. Go ahead and separate everything here. It just makes everything a lot easier. You get your hardware for coming up through your stack, and these do look like plastic hardware. All of that's plastic in there, no metal. I'd like to see that maybe these posts were metal coming up through the stack, but yeah, that's just going to have to be good enough. And we have Pagoda antenna, our VTX video transmitter right here, and the antenna cable with an MMCX connector. That's great for that. You also get a battery bumper. Your strap can come through this and protect your battery in a crash. This is all of your pieces for your quad. These are pretty nice arms. They're thinner than the other arms on the TYRO99, and they have 3 bolts here, 3-bolt configuration, giant hole for that bottom of your motor coming down through there, and it should be centered up when we put it on there, but nice and thick. 5mm arms look great. I wish they gave us maybe 5 of the arms because we're going to have to buy some extra arms. If you do get this kit, go ahead and get yourself some extra arms. I'll try to find some links for extra parts and put them down below for you guys. It's a true X configuration. These are your side plates right here. and also 2 little wrenches. I don't usually use these. I usually just toss these to the side because they chip and break. And that's about it for what's included in the box. Oh yeah, one more thing here. A set of these. These are actually quad props, and I'll tell you the number on them. 5040s. 5040 tri-prop. So not a super aggressive prop. We can put these on the quad later and try it for review. They're fairly low pitch, so it might be okay. Usually I don't run quad props. I usually like to run tris or bi-blades, but those will do for getting us started. So let's go ahead and talk about the tools you guys will need. Now, the most important tool of this entire build is going to be the TS100. If you don't have one of these, click the link down below. Buy one of these immediately. This is the best iron in the hobby right now. It is firmware updatable. It will melt solder in about 20 seconds time, so super fast. Also, if you're going to look for solder, get the 6040 solder down below. There's a pretty good deal on that from Banggood for, like, I think it's like $4 or something. You'll also need this cable, and this will allow you to plug it into any battery in your kit, pretty much. 4S battery, 1300. These are great. Plug it in and you can build an entire quad with a 4S 1300. Pretty sweet iron. And you will need some steel wool little bell for dipping this in and cleaning off the tip. You're going to need one of those. I'm going to put a link down below for those as well. Also, get yourself some VHB. This stuff is incredible for holding down your receivers, and usually once it's on, it does not let go. Some helping hands. You will need a smoke stopper for checking all of your soldering. Once we get everything all soldered up, we're going to plug in the quad to this, and if the light lights up, I know I have a problem on the quad somewhere. I have a short, or some tabs are touching solder side by side. So very important during this build that you don't bridge any solder unnecessarily next to each other, like motor wires or anything like that. So you can have the puff of white smoke at the end of your build after you spent 2 hours building it, and that's a huge problem. So this will avoid that. I'm going to put that link down below. This is a Race Day Quads smoke stopper. Also, you'll need a driver kit, hex driver kit, some small screwdrivers for usually for the screws putting on your camera. Those are usually little Phillips head screws. You will need some type of motor nut wrench, and this one's cool from RDQ. It's got this little stubby end on it right here for your motor nuts. And you also, in this kit, I got the version with the hex and the mini screwdrivers as well. So you will also need some needle nose pliers, possibly some scissors, and one of your most used tools besides your iron would be a good pair of snips. These are awesome. And some tweezers. Sometimes you need to hold a wire during your soldering, and those are great to have in your kit. But I love these because it comes in a nice little case, and I take this wherever I go out in the field, and I'm pretty much ready to go with the inclusion of my TS100. I'm pretty much fit to make a repair anywhere I go. Okay, so like I said before, go ahead and take all of your hardware and put each individual bolt in its individual pile. Put all of your threaded nuts in a little pile here. The first one we're going to use is the longest screw. So we're going to take this bottom plate, and the arms have 3 holes through them. So we're going to put the first arm through here like this. So I'm sort of jumping forward in time here, and I want you to not make a mistake on your frame like I did mine. I didn't go back and look at the bottom picture that EACHINE had of the quad, so this X plate goes on the very bottom, and this will go above it like this, because when you go to mount your side plates, they are super short, and if you have this on the bottom like this, these 2 holes up front are where you're going to put the screws through. Your bolts are going to go through there. This will be too short, and your stack is going to hit this side plate. So make double sure that you put this on the bottom of the whole stack, and this goes on the very top. So, but keep in mind, you're going to start out with this on the bottom. So it's going to go like down here, 3 holes in, just like that. You're going to put your longest screw through the end with that nut on the bottom, and that's how you're going to assemble. The next screw in is going to be your plastic threaded screw for the stack, and then finally this next screw bolt will be this one going into your post from the bottom. So that way everything makes sense. I'm just going to go ahead and assemble one part of it here to show you. So you're going to take your threaded nut here, put it on the top, and if you have a pair of needle nose pliers with a little bit of like threaded grip, those work great. The flat ones don't work so great without the threaded grip. I got my RDQ ones here, and those are threaded, by the way, so those are the ones to get in that kit. So I'm just going to go ahead and tighten that up, and don't tighten these up until you really get finished with your build. So fully tighten them, just leave them just a tiny bit loose so that you can move things around if you need to for the next arm going on. And you're going to repeat this process all the way around, and then we'll come back to the build. So these 4 bolts should be, these fasteners should be on the very top, and your top plate should be like this. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this, and now you can go ahead and grab your 4-in-1 ESC. We're going to mount that to just to the top of a couple standoffs, and if you look at this 4-in-1 ESC up closely, you should see an arrow on one side. There should always be an arrow on the ESCs. This particular ESC set does not have it, unfortunately, but normally the way things go here is that we have 3 tabs for each motor, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're labeled on the harness here, S4, 3, 2, and 1 here, and battery 5-volt and ground there for powering your flight controller coming up. But just barely, if you look a little bit closer here, you see a 1 here, 2, 3, and 4 in that corner. So motor 1 here, motor 2, motor 3, motor 4 on those 3. And then we'll put our XT60 battery cable right on the back. So that'll be the first step when we start to solder, and then we'll do the motor wires afterwards. So what you want to do now is go ahead and grab 4 of your plastic standoffs. These are the ones that look like this. Now go ahead and drop 4 of those on top of each post. Okay, not super hard. Now we're going to put the 4-in-1 ESC on top of your post with this harness up. That's the way that's going to go. Okay, at this point you can take a couple of the grommets and put on, say, just 2 sides here. You could do all 4 if you want. So now go ahead and grab your TS100, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to put some solder down on the motor battery tab in the very back, positive and negative there, and then we're going to tin up the wire on the end of our battery leads. They do come pre-tinned from the factory, but we're just going to do that again. We're also going to trim these off just a little bit shorter with your snips. Okay, my iron's pretty much ready to go at this point, and now I'm just going to trim these off, make them a little bit shorter. To make this a little bit easier, you could use some helping hands to help you hold this wire, because these wires get really, really hot. So we're going to go ahead and bring that over in front of the camera here, and we're going to clamp both these down. And the way you know that, set your quad to the side so you don't drip any solder on top of your ESCs. That would be a very bad thing. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some solder here. And we're going to tin these up. And the big deal about this is that you want to see that the solder on the wire, if the wire's hot enough, it will melt the solder when you touch it to the wire. Very important. So go ahead and put some solder on the tip of your TS100, clean it off, and go ahead and touch it. Add a little bit to the tip, because that transfers the heat to the wire a lot quicker than a dry soldering tip. So we're just going to let it sit there, have some patience with these. So now I'm touching the solder to the wire, and it's already bleeding through. So I have a nice tinned ground wire. Now we're going to do the positive wire. I'm just going to put a little solder on the edge of the iron there. Let it transfer the heat. It's already hot enough. The TS100 is great because it really does heat up even the thickest gauge wire super fast. So now the next step is grab your quad, slide it over, and we're going to put some solder on the ground tab here. We're just going to load it up. Okay, put plenty of solder on there to get it in the frame so you guys can see it. You're going to load it up. Be careful not to bridge over to the next tab. This is a really huge tab, and there's actually a nice spacing in between both of these tabs, which is really great. Hold down your iron there. Just move it around so it gets solder all over that tab. Make a nice big shiny blob. Okay. Don't do it very long. Don't touch your soldering iron to this tab very long, or any of the tabs on your 4-in-1 ESC or any of the other components, because you can actually separate the tab from the ESC if you put too much heat too quickly and keep that iron moving. There we go. That looks pretty good. So we have a nice pool there. They look nice and shiny. Okay, just double check those. I could use a little more on this one. You really want a liberal amount of solder on this tab. Okay. All right, that's looking good. So now I'm going to remove this from my helping hands, and I'm going to come over here and we'll do the positive wire first. So I'm going to add a little more to my tip, clean it off one more time, put some more on there. Okay. I'm going to heat up the wire first because you don't want to put all that heat on the tab and have it separate from the ESC while you're waiting for this wire to heat up. When you see all of this solder start to flow, that's when you can put it down and start to melt the solder on the tab. So do the wire first, as always, and then drop it down into the equation, and it's just going to go a lot better for you. So once that looks nice and shiny, we can pull our iron back and check out our work. Okay, so I'm going to clean the tip again. I'm going to add some more solder here on the tip, and we'll start melting the solder on this side, on the ground side. TS100 is so great because it does work pretty quickly. Okay, and I'm trying to make sure I have contact with the surface of that tab. You do not want to have it floating in the solder. Just push it down with your iron and pull back off just like that. Look how long that takes. Doesn't take long at all. So now we can start doing each individual motor tab. So I'm going to spin this around. Okay, this will be motor number 1 here. We're just going to go ahead and put some solder on each of those tabs. Not very long. Okay, you can add a little more if you think you need it. That's looking pretty good. And you're just going to go and do this all the way around. I feel like the Bob Ross of like FPV. Fluffy little clouds of solder smoke. Hopefully I have enough solder to go all the way around here. I'm running out of solder. If I do run out of solder, well, then we'll just move on to the next step, because you know what you're doing at this point. You're just going to fill up all these with a good amount of solder. You want a nice little ball of solder. Everything should be nice and shiny here. If not, you need to put some more heat to it and do it over again. If you're using cheap solder, it's going to look dull and gray. If it looks dull and gray, redo it until it's nice and shiny. All right. Gray means that you had a cold solder and it can separate. The wire can just pop off while you're flying. So very bad thing. So that's looking pretty good. Now we can move on to adding the motors in the equation. Okay, so now go ahead and grab your first motor here. Twist up the wires. Yes, I like to twist up the wires. And I'm going to use a zip tie on my arms for my motor wire. I'm not using the heat shrink. If you want to use the heat shrink, I put a note earlier in the video to slide these on before you put the arms on. Then you can shove these wires through there. But I'm going to save this for something else. because I like to have my wires on the arm just like this without the heat shrink. It sounds strange, but that's the way I like to do it. So the next thing you need is some Loctite, some blue Loctite. Go ahead and grab your M3 driver and look for the screws that are around this length. They are not the shortest screws in the pack. Go ahead and put one on the end of your driver. And this is the easier way to do it. Just put it on the driver, clean it off with your fingers, wipe it off on your jeans. Who cares if it stains them? So I'm not the kind of guy who really cares about that. I'm going to go ahead and drive that through. And if that's not showing long enough, like that's not showing long enough, I'm going to grab the next size up here. I have everything in piles, so it's actually going to be this screw right here. It's the third longest from the shortest size. Actually, not the second longest. You don't want to make the mistake of using too short screws on your motors because, yeah, your motor will fly off. Okay, so go ahead and have that wire harness facing the center of the quad, just like that, down the arm, and that's the direction you want it. And I'm not going to over tighten that right now. I'm going to grab another one of those screws out of that pile. Third longest screws, bolts. And bolts and screws are different, by the way. Bolts are generally machined. Screws usually go into wood. Alright, I say screw all the time anyway. Screws are usually sort of a wood screw threaded pattern. These are machine pattern. Alright, so that's metal to metal contact right there, and there's a lot of vibration under those motors, and make sure that your C-clamp in the middle right here is somewhere in the middle, not rubbing on the edge of the frame. So if it's not perfect, doesn't matter, just as long as it's not rubbing on the frame. You'll actually have a motor have a huge problem. It'll short out because you don't want any kind of, you don't want any anything pushing on the center of that stator and that shaft while it's rotating. The slightest amount of something pushing on the motor while it's in operation will cause a big problem. So that looks good there, nice and tight. Now you can tighten all three of them, and we can begin the next step here. Make sure all your stuff stays together here. A neat pile. Sometimes things get moved around while you're building. So now if I want to, I can lift this up and I can run around. I can run around this way. I can come up like this, or I can be fancy and I can do it from the bottom. If you're really fancy, some manufacturers solder the ESC motor wires to the bottom, but I think I'm going to come around like this. And this is where you can use your tweezers. So go ahead and grab your tweezers. And your tweezers will help you do two things. Hold the wire in place and bend it over to where it's flat and angled correctly. So you can kind of bend it just a little bit here. And these are also pre-tinned. I'm going to put a couple spacers on top of here. I don't know if it's actually going to help hold it down or not, but it's kind of wiggling a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and put these on there. Okay. Let me zoom into this so you guys can see this a little better. My iron is ready to go. And if you want to, you can put your quad frame in some helping hands to kind of hold it still a little bit. So go ahead and grab some of your solder, clean off the tip again before you start. Okay. Just put a little solder on there and then drop it down in your solder cleaner. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my tweezers, and we'll do the first wire out of 3 for motor number 1. So I'm going to heat the wire up first, and then I'm going to make contact with the tab next. Okay, now if it feels like it's not heating up fast enough, you might need a little bit more solder on your soldering iron tip. If it feels like it's too dry and it's not melting, a dry tip will do that. So make sure you use plenty of solder on your tip, but not too much. Does that make any sense? So here we go. That's looking pretty good. I'm just gonna redo that one real quick. I didn't like the way that first one came out. Never hurts to redo things, guys. Okay, you kind of hear it start crunching a little bit. That lets you know that the solder is flowing. Okay, very good. So pull back away with the direction of the wire here. Now I'm going to do the next one. I'm going to use my tweezers to bend it around and make an angle. Sort of make it come horizontal there. And now what that will do is give me a good angle that I can hold it with the tweezers, and it will allow it to set flat. So I'm going to get some more solder here. Just make sure that tip is nice and wet there. And I'm going to come back, drop it down. I'm going to heat the wire up first. I'm kind of working over my camera a little bit while I'm doing these builds, so if my wires don't look perfect, that might be why. Okay, and wait for it to blob up and pull back along the wire like that, and that will not give you what I call a shark fin. A shark fin is a piece of solder that stands straight up, sort of pokey, and a lot of times if you have shark fins in your builds, if something comes too close to it, it'll short it out. So pull that wire down with your tweezers. Keep your soldering pin moving a little bit, making contact with the tab and the wire at the same time, and pull back. And give it just about 3 to 4 seconds and then let go of everything. If you let go too soon, sometimes the wire will just drop off the tab. So those are the first 3, and we will zoom in just to check those out. If anything looks scary, I will redo it. Okay, that looks okay. Not my best work in the world, but I just give a tug on everything. Everything feels solid. I can tuck those in a little more there, and those are ready for a zip tie around the arm. And now you're going to do this next 3 and these 2 over here as well, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so after that long process of going around and soldering all of your motor wires to your ESC tabs, you should have 3 wires from each motor going up to the first 3 tabs here, these 3 tabs on the top here, these 3 tabs from this motor, and these 3 tabs up top for this motor. Tucked underneath the ESC, everything looks great here. So now we can start working our way up on this build. So the next thing we're going to do is grab the harness that's going to power from your ESC. This is your motor signal wire and power. So we're going to come up from that, and we're just going to look at this and see that the pins are up. Configuration, yes. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. Now I'm going to grab some more standoffs here. We're going to put 4 standoffs on each side here. There we go. And now we're going to grab the flight controller, and you want your flight controller facing the forward direction. See an arrow there? Super big, not hard to find. This is likely going to be the camera plug here. This will be your signal and your harness and your power. And looks like back here we have the port for the receiver. There's also direct solder tabs on the bottom of this as well. So if you want to run, and I recommend you do this for your XM Plus or whatever receiver you're using, on the very bottom right here it says PPM SBUS 3.3 volt right there for DSM-X, and it looks like we have 4.5 there for any type of XM receivers and ground. So for you SBUS guys, it might be better direct solder this than use the harness. I don't like this one because it vibrates loose and you lose signal and you drop to the ground. So I don't really recommend this. They have the cable in the box for it. It's right here, but I probably wouldn't do this. I would probably snip this off, direct solder to your XM Plus, and straight to the flight controller for that. So we're going to put this arrow facing forward here to the front of the quad. First we're going to plug it in, and we can push this back like this, kind of tuck it underneath it, and again it probably should be pins up. Yep, looks like pins up there. Plug that in. So now we have power to the flight controller. Now we can just put our finger down there and tuck it underneath, tuck all those wires underneath, and bring the flight controller down like that. And we're just going to look around here to see that we're not making any contact. So now we have the first part of our stack done. Right on, you guys. Good job. So congratulate you at this point. You've pretty much 80% built your quad at this point. You've pretty much done all the soldering also that you need to do. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and grab the camera. So go ahead and get your CADX camera, and your camera is going to plug in right here next to your signal harness. So I'm going to just bring it like this so you can see it here. Okay, the pins are facing up, so same thing with your harness there, facing up. Don't push on things too hard in this hobby or you'll break things. These harness, the plastic, this beige plastic is super brittle, and these things break on me all the time, so I'll be extra careful with that. Now we're going to grab the VTX. Man, we're just moving right along on this build. Let me zoom in for you so you can see a little closer here. You guys should be proud of yourself how far you've come here. This VTX is going to face like this, guys. So we're going to grab our signal wire here and pins up again. Your signal 5-volt and ground there goes on just like that. That yellow one is your video wire, and that one is going to plug in on the side right here, this side right here. So again, pins up configuration. Okay, just push it in till you feel it seated like that. And what I really should do is just pull this off and solder my receiver down underneath here. So before I get too far along on this, my next step is going to be putting on the receiver. So I'll show you how to solder up an XM Plus receiver to your build and how the wires go on this. Okay, so go ahead and turn on your TS100 and clean the tip off again. Get yourself some of that 6040 solder, and we're going to put some solder on each of the tabs for the XM Plus here. So we're going to do SBUS, that's your signal wire. We're going to do 4.5 volt wire tab here, and that's going to be the red wire, and then the black wire is going to be your ground wire on the very end right there. So just hold your iron there, just really quick. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and that's the 3 wires that you're going to need to solder down. So go ahead and grab this plastic wire here with this 3-pin connector on this side and the servo plug here. What I'm going to do is just grab my snips, and I'm going to snip this servo connector off here, off this end. I'm going to tin all 3 of these. You can snip these off with your fingers if you have fingernails. Okay, so just snip off each end of those. And it would be nice if things were more plug and play here, but I don't trust the harness that's on the flight controller. So I've had quads drop out of the air with those types of connections. I like to direct solder things so that I have a more reliable connection. And you can trim this wire back a little bit. You don't need it so long. We're going to snip off this other end here. Okay, and you can leave it twisted up. That's fine. We'll probably twist it a little more later and tuck it somewhere. So go ahead and pinch those off with your fingernails if you have some. If you're fancy, you can use some wire snips. Okay, that looks pretty good. At this point, grab your helping hands and bring those over. Just going to zoom out a little bit because I'm getting too close here. Okay, go ahead and put these in your helping hands. Bend those over just like that. And we're going to tin those up. Just a momentary piece of solder will help us do that. See if I can get it to focus for you on that one spot there. Okay, now separate your wires good and come in here just like this on each one really quick. Now we're going to do the bottom end. Okay, we'll do those and clean the tip off after you do this because you're going to have a lot of excess on there. So that's looking pretty good. Now I can put my XM Plus receiver in there. And this is funny, I did this the opposite way that it actually works on my last build. I switched the positive and the ground wire, so I'm not going to do that this time. Just happens when you get in a hurry. So usually I like to do my signal wire first, and it's pretty easy to remember the way that the XM Plus solders up to. Should go ahead and grab a little more solder on that end of that tip. The signal wire always goes on the gold bind button side of things. So if it moves around too much, do it again, pull back along the wire. Just, there we go. And next is going to be your 5 volt. So solder that on. Make sure it's nice and flat on the tab. You don't want any bridging from one side to the other. You want to be really careful about that. If you have some bridging occur between tabs, you might actually get a short out. So that's looking pretty good there. I'm working over the camera a little bit quick here, so bear with me. Now, I'm going to twist these wires up at this point a little bit to save me some time later. And you just want to make sure when you do that, that none of these connections close to the receiver are touching each other, because this is plastic wire, and plastic wire are just not the best stuff in the world. So look at the tips on each of your wires here. If they're a little bit long or they need a little bit of extra solder, you can do that now. Go ahead and clean off the tip again. Okay, and I think these are just a little bit long, so I'm going to actually take my snips and I'm going to shorten these before I put them on the tabs. Okay, just barely want them resting on the tabs there. Don't need a lot of excess. So we're going to do the first one here, and that's going to be the signal wire, which is going to be your SBUS. That's that yellow wire. Yellow wire usually on your video transmitter is going to be your video wire, your signal wire. So we're just going to lightly drop it down there, make sure it's making contact with the tab. Okay, now you're going to do your 4.5 volt tab there. Hopefully that will power this XM Plus. Normally it's a 5 volt, but maybe it's different on this particular flight controller. If your tip feels dry, just go ahead and add a little more solder on the tip. My tip got a little bit dry there, so let's go ahead and add some more here. I'm not using any helping hands, so things are moving around a little bit. You can put your flight controller in a clamp if you want to be really precise with your soldering. Okay, hopefully you can see that there. It's a little bit to the left. I'm just going to move it. If you don't like the way stuff looks, it never hurts to redo things. That looks better. Now we're going to do the ground, and now you've got a solid setup for your receiver, because otherwise it's just a little bit janky. The connector is not, I'm not a big fan of that connector. It does come out, causes problems. So now this is much more reliable setup for your receiver. Okay, great guys, you should have your receiver soldered on now. If you wanted to plug it in, you can do that. Just make sure for SBUS, this is going to be a tip for you guys. There are two little tabs right next to the receiver harness right here. Furthest to the left, the two tabs need to be bridged for SBUS. If you're running PPM, or I guess DSM or iBus there, those are on the right hand side. So you DSM guys, you need to bridge the two tabs on the right hand side. SBUS guys, two bridged tabs on this side. So that's the way that's going to go. Now we're going to add our VTX on the top. Back to that step that we were doing earlier, and we're going to make sure that this MMCX connector is facing the back. So let's go ahead and tuck that wire under here. And also there's some S port tab on here as well, and some RX-TX tabs if you guys want to do that with your VTX. Okay, and we're just going to go ahead and put the side plate on each one here. Looks like there is 4 holes through the side for a bolt, 2 in the back, and one of the 2 in the back is going to be a longer one. So you're going to put the shorter one, grab them from your shorter pile here. This goes on the bottom part here. And then you're going to run a longer one through this entire side plate to reach this back antenna piece. And I'll just look for the bolt that's going to do that. Looks like that one will work, so I'm going to run that through there. There's no threading inside this hole right here, so. And we're going to make sure that we're not pinching any of the motor wires when we put this down, and see how tight that is. That's some super tight clearance. So you really have to do this exactly right. This goes over the top. I'm going to double check that I'm not pinching any wires. Make sure you have those holes lined up, or you'll start to strip things. I could see that I was starting to strip mine on that last go round. It didn't work out so well. Now this back hole is lined up, good to go there. Drop the bolt down in there. And yeah, this is not quite as easy of a build as the TYRO79. This one's more of a particular type of construction, and the problem with tight builds is you have more chance for shorts. Be very careful about your shorts. So I'm going to go ahead and put those smaller bolts in here. It's a little bit small, but I'll make that work. So you could use Loctite on this to keep your camera in one spot, and make sure that the way that this looks like it's set up is the wires are on the bottom on this particular camera. If not, you can also flip these cameras on the vertical axis. So you could go, if it's upside down, you can flip it instead of taking your quad apart. So that's kind of cool. That looks about right there. I'm going to give myself about 30 degrees tilt on this camera. And now I'm ready for my other sidewall here. And that looks like that fits perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do the bottom bolts first. Push it in a little bit with your fingers. The sidewall is not directly lined up with that hole, so you have to give it a little bit of pressure. Okay. Good. So now we got both sidewalls on. I'm going to tighten up this one in the back. You can wiggle your driver to get it back out if it gets stuck. And I still haven't decided where I'm going to put my ES or my receiver. So I think I'm going to tuck my receiver back in this area. So I'm actually going to take this back piece off for now. And okay, so we have plenty of room up here for our receiver. And I have one bolt through back here. I'm going to take this next bolt and we're going to run that through on this side. I'd like to get more angle, but there's actually some components just below it blocking it to really get as much tilt as I'd like, because there is a post on the bottom of this antenna connector that's also coming down further, and it's kind of sitting on the cap down here, really close to the cap. So again, there's not a whole lot of spacing in here. And what I'll probably do also is bring the battery wire out here and zip tie it to the arm. That way it doesn't get pulled on the ESCs if your 4S 1300 flies off, or if you're flying a 1500. But that's looking pretty good there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab myself a piece of VHB, and we're going to snip off a piece, put it on the back of your receiver. And once it's seated, you're to the point where you could go ahead and put your antenna on, and we can power this baby up and we can test. We can do a video test and we can do a smoke stopper test. You want to make sure that you have your smoke stopper on before you plug in your battery. Otherwise you could really have some real problems here. So I was just trying to put that antenna on the back here, and this bolt right here will not accommodate. So we're going to move that to the side. We'll try screwing it down without that on there. Just hold the bottom in place with my hand. Hopefully I can get this tight enough and tighten the whole thing. Yep. So you can take your needle nose pliers and just give it a little tiny turn, tiny extra turn to make sure it's nice and tight. Okay. Now we can take that VHB and stick it on the back of our receiver here. This quad is pretty much done. You just need to put some zip ties out on the arms or up top for my antennas on my receiver, and check our video, and we'll do some Betaflight as well. and some motor direction testing for you to make sure your motors are going the right way. And before I put the top on this, I'm going to bind it up to my receiver. Bind it up to the radio. That's the important next step. Looks like there's some holes through the side where I could add some antennas coming off the top, or I can run them down through here and bring them out on the arms. I'll have to see how this all looks once I do a smoke stopper test. Let's go ahead and grab the smoke stopper, and hopefully no puffs of white smoke or lights come out, but this is going to help you avoid the puff of white smoke. So this side plugs into here. And now I'm going to take my 4S1300, zoom out for you a little bit there, and let's plug this thing in. We should hear a startup chime from the ESCs. Uh-oh, looks like we have a light there, so I have to go back. And I believe that's an issue because of that short stack we just put together. I believe some chips are touching in there somewhere, and that's an issue as far as this build goes. Okay, so plugging everything in and finding that the light goes off, that means you have a short somewhere. So this is actually a good exercise. The first way to start diagnosing something like that is just to start breaking your stack down and finding out where things might be touching. And it looks like we have no lights, so just momentarily, yeah, just pushing down a little bit harder. Okay, we're good there on the light. Now what I can do to double check that is I can take some bolts here and I can just fasten down two sides or some nuts on top of these bolts and just kind of get it seated to where I think it would be as tight as I want it here for my stack. And I have a suspicion that the flight controller was touching the VTX somewhere and causing that light. So we'll go ahead and put two nuts on the top of this stack. And I just think they have this quad built a little lower. They're trying to build the whole thing lower than it really needs to be. They should have just allowed a little more room between the top and the bottom for new builders. There's no reason to really do a super tight build like this for a beginner series quad. I guess the smaller and shorter they make things, a little bit cheaper to manufacture, but harder for the end consumer. So we'll go ahead and look at that light. And it looks good here. Momentarily it lit up. So at this point, with the light lighting up on the smoke stopper, the way that you go back through that, and like I said, you want to go back through that a stack at a time, remove one stack, plug in your smoke stopper, and keep removing things as you go down in the stack to try to find out where your light's coming from. And a lot of times you will find it after a little bit of work, and that's part of building FPV race quads. Unfortunately, sometimes you will come up against the lighting up on your smoke stopper, but the cool thing about having this is that if you didn't have this, you would just have a white puff of smoke come up or possibly ruin one of your ESCs or some other component here. Sometimes I've fried VTXs. It's just all part of the hobby. So from time to time, I make mistakes in my builds as well. So I went back through the quad, and now I'm to the point where I have my receiver on there. I did remove the VTX out of the equation because I was suspicious of the way this was lighting up the bulb. I took this off and it did not light up after that. So I went ahead and redid a few solders here that I was suspect of for my motor wires to the ESCs. And then when I'm plugging the battery in now, everything is good. So I'm going to leave well enough alone there and use this smaller VTX, which actually gives me a little bit better clearance here. It's a 20x20 VTX, and I just VHB'd it down, have my receiver right behind it, and now I have enough room to put this top plate on here, no problem. This sidebar, crossbar right here will go across. And also, guys, you're going to, at this point, not put this on. You're going to go ahead, we're going to go through the bind procedure for you real quick, and we're going to show you how to bind up the XM Plus by using a bamboo skewer to hold down this gold button, and we're going to bind it up in D16 mode. Okay, so at this point, go ahead and grab your bamboo skewer for pushing down your gold button and get your battery ready. Your 4S1300 is totally fine. We're going to go into the model menu on your radio and change your mode to D16 here, and you're going to leave channels 1 through 8. That's fine. Go ahead and press the bind button and you'll hear it start to chirp. Once your radio is chirping, go ahead and reach in here with your bamboo skewer, push down your gold bind button. Now you're going to plug in your battery. Okay, I'm going to wait till I see a green light on the receiver. Let's try to move so you can see that just faint green light. You're still going to see a red light. That's totally okay, but I do see a green light hiding right next to it. So we're good there, and we can turn this off and stop that. Now I can plug in the battery again, and I should see a green light. Sometimes if you hold your quad too close to the radio, you see that when I move the radio away, it went green. So now I'm good with the bind process. And if your radio is too close and you see it sitting right next to it on the bench, sometimes it will lose signal. So if you see a red light, just move your radio about 3 feet away and you'll be good to go. So now we'll move on to the next step. And I can still angle my camera to the position I want. So now at this point, all you need to do, guys, is take some zip ties, put your zip ties on the arms, have your antennas coming out this direction, and one zip tie on the bottom here. You've already Loctited your motors, so you're pretty much good to go now. At this point, we're going to head into Betaflight, and I'm going to help you guys with the radio setup, channel maps, mode switches, and all that good stuff. After that, we'll do some motor direction testing for you. Alright guys, so we're at the point now where we can go ahead and jump into Betaflight and start doing some setup on the 109. So go ahead and grab your quad. Make sure you're using a data USB cable, otherwise you won't get any data and you won't connect. Also make sure you install your drivers and have those installed and your computer restarted before you start Betaflight for the first time, if you're just getting into it. So we're going to check orientation first of our flight controller, and if it's all twisted around, the back is facing you like this and it looks like that, just hit reset Z-axis right there and it will bring the quad back around in the schematic, and you can move it backwards, forwards, left, right. You can see that everything is good there for the positioning of your flight controller orientation. Okay, you can set it flat on the bench and calibrate accelerometer if you'd like to, but it's not really necessary. Next, we're going to go down to the ports tab, and we have UART2 selected there for our receiver for our XM Plus. That's right, there's no smart audio on here yet. You can add that later possibly. Go down to configuration, and we're set up to D-Shot 600, and we're going to turn motor stop off. That way when we arm the quad, it's actually going to give you a low idle like air mode. So and look at this, interesting with the way that they have it's set up for the motor direction in the mixer is actually opposite. It's the exact opposite of what I'm getting with the quad for the motor orientation. And when I spool up the quad later in this video, when I do some motor testing, I'll show you that it's actually configured for props out configuration. But even though in Betaflight it says that it's right turn rear here, and very interesting there. So we're going to make sure your props are right before I let you go in this video. So moving on to board and sensor alignment, that's all zeroed out there. The accelerometer trim zeroed out, and arming we're going to set to 180. I set it like that because if it lands in a tree, I'd like to still be able to arm it to kind of muscle my way out of a tree branch if I need to. Otherwise, if that set to 0 right there, I won't be able to arm the quad at all. Just be careful with that, because you can arm your quad at any angle and you can chop your fingers off. Just be very careful doing that. TYRO109 for the craft name, that's what I have there. You can put any name there, your pilot name, whatever you'd like. RSSI is not configured. Serial-based receiver spec set, SBUS there for receiver for the first tab, and the second tab down here you want SBUS for XM Plus receivers, and if you're using XM or if you're using SBUS. Soft serial, that's okay. Telemetry, OSD, anti-gravity, and dynamic filter. And one thing I have to mention up here, they had barometer and magnometer selected. Uncheck both of these right here, and that's pretty much all we're going to do there. Oh, one more thing. We're going to turn on RX loss and RX set right there. And after you do that, go ahead and save and reboot. And we're going to come back into the next menu down. Should automatically reconnect. And if you don't see a lot of these options, make sure you have enable expert mode on so that you see all of these tabs here. So we're going to power and battery. Minimum cell voltage should be 2.9, warning cell voltage should be 2.9, and maximum should be 4.3. Okay, so now we're going to save that. We're going to go down to failsafe, and guard time, we can set that to 2. I like that it's set to 2. Failsafe procedure, we want that set to drop, as always. Make sure it's set to that. Okay, and now we're going to save and reboot again. Everything's good there. We're going to go back into the PID tuning, and the PID tuning is going to come in a later video when I do fly it and tune it. I will hand over my PIDs to you guys to make it smooth as possible for you. Right now this is stock, and I'll just zoom into this so you can see what the stock PID settings are. And looks okay there. Super rates are set to 7.0. That's very standard for flying acro. It's going to give you a pretty good amount of control there. I'll just zoom back in here. I-term rotations on down here in PID controller settings. And this is your rates preview. At this time you could plug in a battery if you know your quad is good. I will turn on my radio and we'll see if any of that's moving yet, and I doubt it is. Oh, actually it is. That's without the battery plugged in. Subquads require you to plug in the battery, but I'm checking out that's the pitch and the roll and the yaw. Okay, that's all the rates. So if you change it in the super rates right here to make it higher, something like 80 or 75, that will increase that amount of rotation for you. So if you want that to be faster than that, that's pretty fast at 7.0. That's totally fine for me. So I'm going to save there, and I'm going to go down to receiver now. And cool is that this quad does not require a battery to be plugged in to check our receiver and our channel maps. If your channel maps don't look like mine here, you can go to the channel map and change it to AETR. That's the FR Sky option down below here, and save that. And then you should get something that looks like this. Radio setup, channel activating switches and things like that. That's a whole different video than this one. But if you already have one quad done, what I do is copy and paste the next quad to the next one, and that way you don't have to set up your switches all over again, because you're using the same kind of switches every single time. So my arm switch is my index finger one out here. This is the long one, and that's on aux 1. This is how you see which aux you're going to select when we go down to the modes tab. You have to select one of your auxes. So my aux 2 is going to be my switch here for my modes, and my beeper will be over on aux 3 on the other side of the transmitter. So I'm going to go to modes here, and I'm only flying in acro mode, so I have nothing else here except arm. And you can see if I arm it, see how this little gold bar goes in there, and I can scooch that over by grabbing a white tab there, just dragging it over, press save. Now if you want to add angle, which is stability mode for you beginners, drag that over in the middle, and you won't see this gold bar move until you hit save. So go ahead, and we're going to select aux 2. If you need to go back and see which aux it was, which switch it was, go back to receiver and fiddle with your switches, and you'll see which aux you want things to be on. So now when I clicked save, you notice how that lit up? Now my mode switch is active. When I move to middle position, the gold bar goes here, and I can add horizon as a range there. I can select aux 2. So now I have horizon and stability mode, otherwise known as angle mode. Hit save, and now you can see that horizon lights up. And free floating on the end is just going to be pure acro mode. There is no range on this side here for acro. You won't see it in this menu. If you're looking for it, you can't find it, that's why. And the beeper, we're going to add that on aux 3 all the way over here. Hopefully that's going to be a D-shot beacon beeper. If your D-shot beacon beeper does not work, your ESCs don't chirp, that means you need to update to the latest version. And now my beeper is active. So when I have a battery plugged in, I should hear my ESCs chirp. If they don't, then I'll have to go back and reflash my ESCs in BL Heli. So now we're going to go down to OSD, and they don't have anything selected here. So I'm just going to go ahead and activate a few things and turn off the warnings. I don't like that. Now we're going to go up to main battery voltage. I always want that. So I'm going to drag that down. And all you do, guys, is just drag things around the screen. Drag and drop. And that's how you position what you want on your OSD, where you want it on your screen. Now you can also go to Font Manager if you'd like, and you can make that bold font. And you push Upload Font, and that will make the font bold. And there's a few different presets you can choose there. It's going to make the quad restart. You can check your OSD and your goggles again to see if that font actually took. Sometimes when I do that in Betaflight, it doesn't actually save. And look at that, it didn't save anything right then. So very strange. Maybe I should have saved before I did the font manager. So lesson learned. I've never done that before actually. So new stuff every day. And you notice I'm putting this a little bit higher. Sometimes if you put it too low down here, it will actually get chopped off. You won't see it. And then you'll have to go back into Betaflight and reposition things. So we're going to put craft name back down here in the middle. This time, let's try it again. Let's do save this time before we go to Font Manager. And we'll go into Font Manager. I know it's saved. Extra large here. Upload font. And waiting just a minute. You can also add your own custom pilot screen there if you want to go into Photoshop and do an image and load it inside Betaflight. You can do that. It's pretty cool. So now we'll go back to OSD here, and the font didn't take. Sometimes it doesn't show here in Betaflight, but it might show in your goggles. So sometimes this is not always true, actually, what font is shown. So you can go in here and add all kinds of things, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to go to the CLI now down at the very bottom. We're going to type in version, and we see that we have a Maytech F405 on board. That's cool. August 2014, 2018. This is probably some older firmware that you could update. There is a boot button on the flight controller that you can use, and you want to select this as your firmware target, Maytech F405, for your firmware to flash. And that's outside of this area. That's back to the main screen of Betaflight. So what I would like to do now is do a DUMP, type in DUMP, hit return, and it will give you every single line of code and all the items that are saved on your flight controller. So what we'd like to do now is save to file, and we're going to save the CLI dump to TYRO109 to my desktop, and I'm going to upload that to Google Docs for you guys so that if you need to have all of these settings saved in a file, just like we did here in the video, you'll have that link down below, guys. Let's go ahead now and let's go ahead and disconnect, and we'll go and check the motor direction. And I should have props out configuration. Here we go. Okay, so now you're basically finished with the quad, but you need to know which way your motors are turning. If you would like to set it up the traditional way, you can go inside BO and you can change around things to right turn rear, and this one will also need to be right turn. These two will be left turn. Now for a props out configuration, I'm going to show you that setup, which is already on this quad. So props out configuration means that the front props will spin out, and just a little easier sometimes to kick yourself out of a tree branch if you get caught. So that's the only advantage of having props out configuration. So that means that instead of right turn rear, we're going to have a left turn rear. So go ahead and put your prop nuts to the side. Do not put a prop nut on top of this. This is kind of the manual way of doing things without using the Betaflight motors tab. You can also use that tab to be able to use individual motors at a single time, but this I find is the quicker way. So I use an old school dowel prop. It's been used so much that the shaft is kind of bored out, and that lets it kind of free spin on a lot of shafts that I test. So let's go ahead and plug in the battery, and you know, the worst that can happen is this thing can fly off and fly up in the air. So just be careful when you do this. I don't take any responsibility and hit yourself in the eye with it. So go ahead and momentarily flick your arm switch, and it's going to put it into that sort of air mode. Okay, you see it turn there? We know that it's going to the left, yeah? It's going to the left. Good job. Now this one over here should also be rotating the right way. To the left. That one's going to the left. And now my front right should also go to the right. And see how it just kind of free spins there, even if I really give it a lot of juice. Sometimes they fly off and fly up in the air. So, okay. Back rear. Also turning to the right. So both of these are turning to the right, and I've got the props out configuration going here. So perfect. Left turn. And this might be confusing for some new people. You can do it the traditional way if you'd like to, but that is a quad that is ready to fly. All right, guys, so there you have it. There is your TYRO109. It's all built, ready to fly, and hopefully I'll do a flight test and review coming up for you guys on the channel. It was more challenging to build this one than the TYRO79, so if you're new, I would start with the TYRO79 and work your way up to this one. This one had some stack issues that were a little bit daunting. Things are a little bit tight in there, even for a more experienced builder. This is more challenging to build than your typical bind and fly kit. So yeah, so you want to follow along very closely and pay very close attention when you're building your TYRO109, that you don't have any of the boards touching side to side. I know someone might make the comment that we have the props out configuration, but I have the clockwise motor nut on this one, even though it's turning this way. That is the direction that would actually loosen the nut. In my experience of flying, I have never had one of these types of lock nuts ever back off of a motor. So these nuts are extremely hardcore, and when you tighten them down properly, they will not come off, even though they're rotating the direction. So that is the thing about props out. If you would like to switch these motors around and work with this props out configuration, and then have the motors turning the prop direction, the correct direction, that's fine. You can do that. Makes your build a little more complicated, but I really honestly wouldn't worry about it too much. You can also do the traditional setup like I showed you before, right turn rear, as I always talk about on the channel. But again, guys, if you enjoyed the build video, I've put a tremendous amount of time into this video to help you guys out. I pretty much spent an entire day working on this build and getting this just recorded, and another part of a day editing and doing post on this to get it out to you guys. A very long process for this one, so I took a lot of time because I think that the quality of the components on this one are better than the original TYRO99, and I wanted to put the time and effort into it for you guys, because I know a lot of you guys are going to buy this kit. So I appreciate you watching as always, and if you want to help support the channel, by all means, help support me and my family. Click on that Patreon link down below, become a member, and get entered to win this awesome Cinebee coming up very soon on the channel. Look how small it is sitting next to the TYRO109. Check that out. Isn't that cool? This thing is super tiny with HD capability. This one definitely can carry any type of action camera out there, GoPro or otherwise. And my recommended battery for this particular quad is going to be the 4S1300. The GNBs are awesome, and also the RDQ 4S1300s. I'm going to put a link down below for the GNBs and the RDQs. Cool thing about the RDQs is you can get those domestically in the USA. So whatever battery, get some of them, get some of both of them and try them out and see which ones you like better. I've put this one through absolute hell and it's still going. So GNB is great stuff, and I'll put some links down to these props because these are going to be my props of choice on this quad. These are from Gem Fan. These are the new flash props. See, they are 5149 props, and I'll try to put a link down below for these. Those are brand spanking new. They just came in my shop from Gem Fan. So thanks to everybody for watching again. I'm Justin Davis. Take care, everybody. I'll see you on the next one.